if we keep chasing the nirvana of the perfect job, then you're never going to be in that place where you have to learn hard lessons.
This is the One Day Podcast. My name is Omar Almajali, and each week I am bringing you some of the most accomplished and inspiring minds in the Middle East and the world to give you a glimpse of their professional life and pull back the curtain a bit on the real and untold story of their success, to inspire you and help you learn from those who have walked the walk so you could move one day closer to your own goals. Hope you enjoy this episode. So welcome everyone to another episode of the One Day Podcast. Our guest today is Scott Armstrong. Scott is currently the editor-in-chief of Arabian Business magazine, which is a leading magazine and is one of the most recognizable and sought-after news source in the Middle East, covering business and industry news on a wide range of sectors, including construction, banking, technology, and more. And Scott brings with him 30 plus years of experience as a journalist, editor, and a strategic communications consultant, and has worked across content in print, digital, video, and social mediums. Welcome, Scott. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Omar. Great to be with you this afternoon.
Thanks, man. I mean, we met briefly at the Future of Work event. I was a panelist at your event, and I've also attended a session that you emceed, and I just knew that I was going to get you as a guest on my podcast because I'm super intrigued by the world of media and journalism, and I'm also excited to get some insider scoop on your own personal journey and get to know you better.
Well, ask me anything you want. I'm fairly honest about it all.
Honesty is key. Awesome. So let's kick this off, starting with our typical question here. Did you ever think that one day you'd be where you are, sitting where you are, editor-in-chief of such a big name?
In a dark cupboard. To be honest with you, no. I mean, I fell into journalism at a very early age. I started as a journalist when I was 16 years old. So I never went to university. I started on a weekly newspaper in a small market town back in the UK, and never quite knowing where it would take me. And yeah, 32, 33 years later, I've lived in the Bahamas, I've worked in Saudi, I've worked in Abu Dhabi, I've worked in Dubai, I've worked in Oman, Qatar. So it's been a journey. It's definitely been a journey, that's for sure.
It has been. What did it take for you to get here, honestly? I mean, if you had to attribute...
Blind luck.
Oh, really?
Blind luck. No. A
lot of luck. I didn't see that coming.
There is a bit of that. There is a bit of you make your own. No. Look, I've been lucky enough that I fell into a job that I really enjoyed, and I think I have been passionate about it for many years. I've also had many good teachers along the way who have been great mentors, and that's been important. And listening and learning to them along the way has helped me, and there has been some luck, being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes you make your own luck, and sometimes you just happen to be in the right place, and sometimes you're in the wrong place. I mean, I have lost jobs. I've had jobs that I haven't enjoyed so much, which have also taught me lots about myself as well. So yeah, I mean, I think underlying everything is I am a hard worker. I am a grafter, but I enjoy what I do, so that really helps.
No, I'm glad you brought passion up, because that was honestly a question I was going to ask you. So this is your passion, essentially. So if you were to choose any other career path, you wouldn't. I mean, you're happy in the world of journalism and everything that comes with it.
I mean, I certainly have been for 30 plus years, yeah. And there are people out there that want to be an entrepreneur when they're 15, and great for them. When I was a kid, I wanted to be one of two things. One was a journalist and the other one was a lawyer. And a friend of my father's was a lawyer, and he was a decent enough bloke, but he showed me all the textbooks that you had to study to become a lawyer. And I was like, no, I'll take a journalist. I'll be a journalist, thank you.
I'll pass on that.
Which meant I'm probably not as well off as I could have been had I been a lawyer, but who knows? I might have been absolutely awful as a lawyer. And I'm competent as a journalist.
Nice. I mean, journalism comes with much more creativity, to be honest, than law, I'd imagine. I mean, but how important do you think it is for people to follow their passions? Do you think it's an overrated thing, a cliche thing, or is it, something you stand by?
I'm sort of 50-50 on this one. I've heard people like Simon Sinek talk about this as well, which is there is a tendency sometimes that we must follow our passions and therefore we don't spend enough time sometimes learning a skill. Like when I started in journalism when I was 16 years old, I used to get sent to cover lots of council meetings, lots of different political rallies, some of which were very boring, but I had to get good at that. And I had to get good at finding the interesting line from that meeting or that conference. So getting good at a skill that not necessarily is your passion really benefits you. Like Excel is not my passion.
Yeah, of course.
But as you go through life, learning something like that, it becomes quite handy. So it helps if you have, if you're passionate about something. But I think there's also, I have discovered different passions on the path because I was doing something and it was unexpected. Now, if I had not stayed in the place I was trying to get good at something, I wouldn't have found that extra passion. Even within this job, I'm still learning passions. I now have, I love writing and exploring the concept of the future of work and mental health and what that all means for us. So it's yes and no. If you've got 30 years in the game, you're probably still doing it because you're passionate about it. If you asked me when I was 18 or 20, was I passionate about it? I'm not sure I could have answered you. I enjoyed it. There were lots of good things about it, but would I have defined it as a passion? No, it was a job. It was a craft. It was a skill that I had to hone and build and get better at. And there were missteps along the way as well. There were lessons to be learned. Sometimes I think like if we keep chasing the nirvana of the perfect job, then you're never going to be in that place where you have to learn hard lessons. Don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100%. I like your perspective on this. So you do believe that sometimes there are these undiscovered passions. And if we are so fixated on a passion that, we thought is our passion as kids, and we're not open to other opportunities, then you're not giving yourself the chance to unlock these different aspects of you and be able to expose yourself to what's out there that could be your passion. And I do believe that passions also evolve in time as you change as a person. But interesting perspective there that you give me.
I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be private detective. I never managed that, but I suppose journalism, there is a little bit of that.
I think you've got the private detective.
And also, look. Thank you. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not.
It is a compliment.
But just that concentrating on a task and getting good at a task, whether you enjoy it or not, there is something to be learned from that, because there are so many people out there that don't have the luxury of following their passions, but do they become to enjoy something because they get good at it, and then maybe that spins off into a passion.
Could be.
That's it. So, but I do think there is a greater awareness, or there is a greater desire for people to follow their passions.
Yeah, more so these days, for sure.
That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. The older generation, their thing was, stick to one career, specialize in it, be so good at it, make your way up to whatever the org structure takes you. But these days, it's so different, especially amongst the millennials and the Gen Zs. Constantly, they're seeking new challenges, and they're constantly asking themselves, like, what is it that I'm passionate about? And what is it that's going to give me this challenge, this adventure, versus sticking to a career and holding on to dear life?
The concept of a job for life, even experts at my end of the age spectrum. I'm not a boomer. My son keeps calling me a boomer. I'm Gen X. But these days, people change careers, not literally jobs, but careers, at least 2 or 3 times. And I have, like, I was a journalist for 30 years, but then I segued into strategic communications and comms. And for 30 years, I defined myself as a journalist. And then I kind of not ripped it up, but then went into strategic communications. And it's interesting, even at the age of 45, 46, you've defined yourself as one thing all your life. And then you change that and you spend 3 or 4 months going, I don't even know. When someone asks me what I do for a living, I now don't know how to answer them. I'm so used to say I'm a journalist, I'm an editor.
Yeah.
And that kind of like self-image is connected to what you do. And that's not actually that healthy. And what is actually quite healthy is to rip that up, try something new. And I thoroughly enjoyed my 2 years in communications, and I learned lots about myself, and I learned lots about just like throwing the rule book out, not throwing away 30 years of experience, but just being in a different sphere and learning off different people that I would have normally been exposed to. So, it's a lot more fluid these days than it was.
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. Personally, I feel like I hate to be boxed with one career. Like, I'm a consultant now for in the smart city space, but I'm also into film. I'm doing this podcast, and I just like to constantly explore these different avenues and see what sticks and what is it that I'm really passionate about. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting topic. I'm always curious and intrigued by what people think about that. Anyways, coming to what you really do, I mean, what does editor-in-chief really, really mean? I mean, it sounds really fancy to me, and I know that it sits at the top of the org structure, but could you break it down to me? And how does your typical day look like as editor-in-chief?
I'm going to answer that by not answering your question, which is there isn't really a typical day for me in this role, but I'm quite lucky in that. So Arabian Business was the first media website to go behind a paywall back in July last year. And I joined Arabian Business in September last year to take the helm because it had gone behind a paywall, because that was such a challenge. That basically kind of changed the DNA of the business, which meant that every day, particularly as we're now charging people to be part of our family, to be subscribers, we had to focus on, well, how can we deliver something of value every day that people are willing to pay for? So I would say, we've been around in the market for a long time, but we are a startup. And I have to operate almost like as someone who is running a startup. Because one day, we'll be doing events. Another day, we're focusing on the website and how can we make the website better. We're focusing on the content and how do we tell stories better. We're focusing on video. How do we do these? We're having these kind of conversations, doing webinars. Sometimes I'll be out at conferences. I might be moderating on stage, trying to get the message of Arabian Business's new mission out there. So any given day can be completely different to the day before. Plus, there's the magazines to get out. We've got a new magazine. We just launched a new magazine, AB Money, which focuses on investment and how you take control of your finances. It's something I wish I'd read 25 years ago. So it's a startup, and also like a startup, I'm not a massive fan of hierarchical structures.
Right. Yeah.
So we do try to be as horizontal as we can. Obviously, particularly when the book has to stop somewhere where, that's good enough to go out, that's safe, that's well reported. But we do try to be as horizontal, shall we say, as we can, rather than a top down, you must do this, then you must do this, then you must do that. A lot of things happen simultaneously at the same level, rather than, a boss, because I don't really think I'm a boss. I endeavor, or I try to be more of a guide and a coach to the team, which is a change as well. That's a leadership style that's evolved over time. But my staff might tell you something completely different. My team will go, it's just annoying. But yeah, obviously every day when I come in, we have to look at the news. We have to see what's the headlines out there, but we don't follow everybody else. We've got to look at it and go, what's relevant to our audience? What do we need to dive into? So we do look at that. We have to keep, and of course there's social media as well, which we have to, look at what do we share at social media, because we try to cherry pick and share the best things rather than just be constantly talking at our audience.
Yeah.
People get tired.
I agree 100%. There's no doubt about, content is king. Even in your LinkedIn profile, it says quality content is king. But the thing is, and just off of what you're saying, content is everywhere now, literally. You're bombarded with messages and content left, right, and center through social media, through news, through outlets and ads or whatever. So my question to you, how do you manage to compete with all of that and all this distraction? Because, we are easily distracted today. And how do you stand out in 2021 with everything that's going on?
By not competing. So, there are lots of media outlets in this region, all of them pointed in a certain direction. Some of them are bigger than Arabian Business. Some of them have bigger teams. Some of them have a different mission. Our mission is very much different, which is right. We don't have to follow what a competitor does. What we need to define for ourselves is, well, what do we think our audience wants and needs? We need to listen to our audience, and then we need to go out and try and deliver something that's exclusive, or something that's valuable, or something that unpacks and gets under the skin of an issue, so that when someone reads it, they come away and go, that was helpful, that was useful, that was relevant to me. If there's competition, it's competition for what we did yesterday. Can we be better tomorrow than we were today? How did we do today versus yesterday? And sometimes we're better, and sometimes we're worse, and sometimes we're on par, but we try to keep moving forward that way. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of noise. All we can do is focus on our audience, our family, and knowing who we're talking to, and then trying to deliver what they want and need, rather than worrying that somebody else has got a different story and that we must cover that as well. If there's a car fire on Sheikh Zayed, that's not what we're here for. It's not our raison d'etre.
But you guys cover a lot of sectors, by the way. I mean, across the board, whether it's smart cities or government or banking or technology. Like, how do you manage to strike a balance between establishing authority in one sector versus, not diluting your message? Like, how do you strategically position yourself in the market today with everything that you're covering? Because you guys do a lot of good coverage and a lot of major industries.
I mean, it's down to the team. Well, and that's where everything comes. We've got good people who learn their sectors well. We've got a team of business reporters who have really embraced this mission of being valuable. So they've stopped chasing breaking news. They've stopped trying to cover everything. We take a breath, take a step back. Right, how are we going to cover this story? And then collectively come together as a team and go, right, we need to be pointed at this, or we need to be pointed at that. Today, we need to be pointed at the 2040 transformational. So who do we speak from all the different aspects? The retirement visa, when the retirement visa was launched in Dubai, there are so many different aspects and angles to that story, from the healthcare, who's going to look after this aging boomer population that's suddenly going to be here. What does this mean for the property market? Are real estate prices going to go up because now, a property that's worth 2 million dirhams comes with a retirement visa? So how do you break it down, and then how do you unpack it? And then the other good thing is you have been one of the great panelists at one of our events.
Thank you.
So, and you were, no, I mean, it was a fabulous event, and
it was really cool.
And that was all about the future of work, and that in itself talked about mental health. It talked about the future of work. It talked about smart cities. So it was from a very personal perspective to a very macro perspective. And those events in themselves create their own content. So we are, in effect, creating our own content for our audience, which we know are going to be valuable for our audience. So it might be that there is a car fire in Sheikh Zayed, but we're not interested in it. What we're interested in is what Omar's telling us about what the future holds for all of us.
Yeah.
And then again, coming back to people, we've got journalists who are amazing in their fields, but at the same time, we've got so many different thought leaders like you, Omar, and voices that contribute to Arabian Business and ArabianBusiness.com. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts sometimes.
I agree. And I love that you guys are doing these events, because you're establishing a community, and not a lot of people do that.
I love them. And the great thing about them is that I get to sit on stage and just listen to really, really smart people. I never went to university. I've been working all my life. And I get now, it's brilliant because I get to sit on stage and listen to incredibly clever people talk about the big issues of the day. And I'm listening and they're going, I'm learning. Which is brilliant, from a personal perspective and a professional perspective.
Wow. So you haven't been to university?
Nope.
And look where you are today, by the way. And that's like a whole different topic that I'm not going to get into now. How much do I believe in higher ed? Let's leave it for another
conversation. We did a podcast about it, and we explored it. Do you? And that is a changing sphere as well. Out here, do you need a degree? It's beneficial because it ticks a box in terms of applying for jobs. How valid it is these days is a really big debate. I can get into that debate with you, but
no, not at all. I think I'm on your side of it, if anything. Like, I'm not a huge believer in higher education, or not higher education, but the whole path of, get your undergrad degree and then get a few years of experience. And then, it's time for you to get MBA. And now all my friends are asking me, are you going to get your MBA or your master's degree? And in my head, I just don't feel the need to do so. I mean, if there's any reason why I would do it, it's because of societal pressures and because that seems to be the right path. But I just am not a believer of this whole system, this whole path.
I don't think a piece of paper defines who you are or the careers you'd have. And we've got lots of people that, you make a decision when you're 18 to study one sphere. 20 years later, you might be in a completely different industry. If I was to say one thing about education, the one thing that people sometimes forget about education, and I've got a son who's in his second year of university, is the experience of being at university. But if you were to turn around to me now and offer me the opportunity just to take a 3-year career gap to just study something I was interested in, that would be an absolute luxury to someone of my advanced years. They'll literally go, there you go, there's something you're interested in, go and study it for 3 years. So like career-wise and qualification-wise, there's a big debate, and there is a big debate going on. You look over in the States where Google are now coming up with their own certificates, which are much, much less expensive than traditional university education, particularly in the States, that are now accepted by all the big institutions.
Yeah.
So there is a change coming in higher education.
Yeah.
Big time. I don't think people need to be defined by what they did at university. It's kind of like you just go into it and get as much out of it. As long as you're learning. In my field, the reason why I'm so passionate still about where I am is I've spent 30 years, 33 years learning. And the minute I got in a job where I didn't think I could learn any more within that situation, you kind of knew it was time to move on. And I've been lucky to have great teachers. So I think it's more about looking for the education. What am I going to learn? And sometimes there are lessons that you didn't expect to learn on the way.
True. Yeah, that's a whole big topic. But I'm glad that we touched briefly on it because I've got my opinions on it, and I'm glad that we agree on it. So editorial journalism, or just journalism in general, it's not an easy industry, right? Because not only does it require good skill, but it also requires, like, the success of an article really depends on the personal touch and the writing style of the person who's writing that article. And I feel like with this territory comes a lot of scrutiny and judgment. I feel like you got to have some tough skin in the game. Have you ever been rejected early on in your career, or have you ever been harshly criticized for some work you've submitted? And if yes, how did you deal with it?
Constantly. No, I mean, yeah, but then, yeah, my wife is constantly, suggesting ways in which I can improve, and she would be right, because she's always right. My second job, I got made redundant from, and I would like to tell myself it was because I was first in and last out. But the reality was, years later, you look back on it and you go, did I do as good a job as I could have? Did everybody else that was around me deserve to stay more than I did? And they probably all did. I think sometimes you have to look at it and go, right, why has this happened? And it's difficult because human nature is that as soon as someone attacks us, our amygdala or whatever, it shuts down, and our critical thinking stops. Yeah. And we're attacked.
Fight
and we
or
need
flight.
to defend.
Yeah,
fight or flight. So you need to take a step back and look at it and go, right, why is this happening? Is there a reason for it? And am I the reason for it? And if you are the reason for it, you then have to look at what can I learn from that experience, and then how do you pick yourself up? What has it taught you about your experience? And I have worked, for legal reasons I won't say, at some point over the 32 years, I've worked for incredibly difficult people. And actually, once I'd walked away from it and I looked back, they taught me more about myself,
right?
Than actually I realized I was learning at the time. They actually taught me more about resilience than I understood that I was learning at the time, because it wasn't a pleasant time. And actually, if I look back, I'm not guilty about my performance in that time, because I actually know I did the best job I could, and I was in a difficult situation. So I can go easy on myself about that rejection, because I'm mature enough to recognize that in that space, I was perhaps harshly judged. But in previous experiences, when I had maybe been rejected, there was always times when you looked at it and you went, I could have done that better. I could have done that better. I could have done that better. It's part of learning, and it's part of being able to admit and own your own mistakes, which comes in time. It's not easy. I am probably beginning to understand that now, age 48. And if you'd asked me age 40, I still think I would probably been head in the sands, not accepting mistakes as much. So, you learn as much, if not more, from the rejections as you do from everything. So everything goes well. If you've ever listened to Matthew McConaughey talk, he talks about green lights, and he wrote a book
Yes.
called Green
Yeah, yeah,
Lights,
yeah. I've
which is
listened
all
to it.
about what and if you talk to any elite sports people as well, they will tell you that you learn more from the hard times about yourself than you actually do from when you're going through green lights and you're sailing through. I mean, I had a 10-year period in my career at one point where everything went right and then everything went wrong, and I had
Yeah.
to pick myself up from it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's you're not going to get through it. If you think about your working career as well, I started from 16. Who knows when I retire? Hopefully the listening audience and you, Omar, are more smarter than I am, and you're already putting money aside and investing it, because you should be, rather than enjoy you're spending all of it on your life, which means you can retire early. But most people have got a 30-year to 35 to even 40-year career. That's a lot of time, and you're not going to get through all of that with no form of rejection. It
Yes.
just
I
it's
agree.
going to happen,
I
and it's
agree.
what it teaches you on the
100%.
way.
100%. And it's not it's not cliche when people say that, honestly, you need to fail to learn. But the thing is that people need to be aware and mindful enough to ask themselves, where did I fall short and how can I improve it the next time, rather than, as you said, go in defense mode. And, like, people need to always be asking these questions, like, what went wrong here? How could I have done better? People need to be open to that process of extracting the learnings from these failures.
Yeah, I mean, the first question everyone should ask, and this is no wisdom. This is just me reading Simon Sinek again, which is,
Yeah, I love
why,
Simon
why,
Sinek.
why did that happen? And if that's the first question you ask, then you begin to ask yourself some tough questions. Yeah. Well, we could talk about that for ages, but yeah, you are going to face rejection. I have definitely faced rejection. I've lost jobs. I've faced plenty of rejection in romance and love, in authoring and journalism, in employment. Yeah, and you just have to learn from it. And I would say I learn more from it now than I did when I was your youthful age, Omar.
You're still young, Scott. What are you
You're
talking
probably,
about?
I think
What
you're
are
a
you
wiser man than me already.
No, I don't think so. But thanks. You're still young. Um, I want to talk about the power of communication. Right, communication is everything. Whether we're
Yes.
doing it at home with our siblings, or with our, with your mom, or whether we're doing it at work with our colleagues or our bosses, whether we're given a presentation. So, drawing from your own experience, how can individuals become more strategic and effective in their communications? Like, if you had to give the audience some hacks around effective communications, what would those be?
First tip, and I see this every day, whether we're communicating with our family, our audience online, or people are posting on social media. I think honesty and authenticity. When we post something that's honest and vulnerable and brave, and the person who is the person talking in the story has been honest and authentic about what they're trying to say, it gets a massive reaction. It really connects. And particularly after 2020, I think there's a lot of, be human. That means be frail, be vulnerable, open up. I've talked about my experiences in toxic work cultures and how they've negatively impacted my mental health in the past. Thankfully, I'm in a very good place here. We had a columnist yesterday on Arabian Business write about how she lost her job in the pandemic, which was very high up in her field. That forced her to reassess everything. She's come back. She shared her story about being made redundant, and then she's launched her own consultancy. It was really interesting because when we were talking about Rueda, very brave woman, she was saying, having lost my job, and she's about, she's younger than I, but she's a high up professional, shall we say. She felt ashamed,
Right. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, of course.
my response, having had 3 jobs myself in 2020, for whatever reason, I don't think anyone who loses their job should be ashamed. People use that word a lot, ashamed, and actually it never really is. But she communicated that with our LinkedIn audience. We posted that. We posted her story. She was brave enough to open up. And by golly, the reaction's been incredible. You know, the amount of reactions, likes, posts, comments. So honesty is key. Just don't try and be a perfect version of yourself. Just be yourself. So that will be tip one. Tip two: don't talk as long as Scott talks when he gives an answer. But no, if I was to look at it from a journalistic point of view, how do we communicate effectively within articles? It is try and distill what you want to say down into a sentence. You know what you want to say before you say it.
Yeah.
You know, and the way journalism is crafted, you know, you have to deliver the facts in the order of importance. So this is the most important things, and then a second paragraph might be the second most, the third most, and the fourth. So if people stop reading at any point, they have got the most important thing. So what is the most valuable piece of information you're about to impart? What is the most relevant thing you're about to impart? And boil it down. I mean, in the communication strategy, we often tell people who are going to be interviewed, stick to 3 key things you want to say. Distill it down to the 3 things you really want to get across, and keep coming back to that. So it's focusing on what the most valuable thing you want to impart across is. And then the last one is listening. When I was at H&K in strategic comms, they used to tell us, they had a really good phrase, which is like suspend your agenda, which is we often don't listen to the person talking to us. We're waiting for them to get to the end of their question so we can then say what we had pre-planned in our head, rather than what was the question they just asked. And we see it on stage as well when I'm moderating and when Eddie was talking to you. You know, we might have a list of questions before we go on stage, but then if the conversation touches on something really interesting, if you're not listening to it, you miss the opportunity to really explore that. We had that we had the Arabian Business Money Forum at just last week, and we had a brilliant guy, Maurice Gravier from Emirates MBD, tell an amazing story about Bitcoin. You know, which and basically like 11 years ago when Bitcoin was $8 a pop, he was in Geneva, and there was a cafe that accepted payment in Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
Bitcoin was worth $8. So he's like, I can't quite remember how much, but I spent anywhere between 5 and 50 Bitcoin on coffee.
Oh my God, man. That is crazy.
Yeah, can you imagine what the reaction in the room? Everyone was like, oh, you know, that's worth $1.8 million at today's prices. And I was like, please tell me, was it at least good coffee? And he was like, no, not so much. But you miss that if you don't listen. So, and again, it's something that I've got better at. But if you're in the media and if in journalism, then the active listening is something that you really need to work on. Try and stop yourself. And I'm an interrupter, Omar. My wife pulls me up on it all the time. I'm an interrupter, and I'm like, stop interrupting people, Scott. But it's true. Like the more you listen, the more you get out. So that's what I would say. I'd say honesty, deliver with focus. What is it you want to say? And listen. And I'm not sure they're in which order they're in.
Awesome tips, man. I've got a question, and you got to be honest here. I need you to forget that you are the editor-in-chief of Arabian Business, and let's even hypothetically assume that we live in a world where Arabian Business doesn't even exist. Where would Scott get his business or industry news from? And if you had to choose maybe the top 2 to 3 sources of news, and one of them has to at least be regional.
Oh, you mean? Oh, okay. Well, I'd say the first source of news and where it all comes from, and you got to remember, I worked in a market town. You know,
okay.
I was a journalist on a weekly newspaper. So you had to go out into the community to find the news. You had to go to meetings. You had to sit down with business people. Sometimes you would literally be walking around the streets in different communities, just learning and seeing what is there. You walk into businesses and go, hello, I know nothing about you. Tell me what your news is. And very much with with Arabian Business, a lot of what we do these days is try to get out into the community. If you think about all the content that we got from the Arabian Business Future of Work Forum, it didn't come from us. It came from you, Omar, and all the great speakers that were on stage. So for me, that's the biggest thing is, is going out and listening to the community. So the community is the biggest source of news.
Well, it's good to know.
Hands down.
But my question wasn't about the source of the news itself, but if you were to choose a magazine or a news outlet that is not Arabian Business, assuming in a world where Arabian Business, doesn't exist, where would you get that industry news from? Like from what news agency or news source? What are your top three?
I mean, there's different horses for different courses. You're trying to get me to give advertising for my competitors. This is not right, Omar. No, I mean, look, if you look at, I've long
give me global
been
ones. You can give me global ones. It's fine.
Well, no, I mean, from a regional perspective as well. I've long been an admirer of the Financial Times, both back in the UK, and they have a brilliant correspondent who I've never met. I hope to one day, but Simeon. I mean, they have this focus, and again, they've been behind a paywall for years, so they've known for years that you have to surface great content for your audience. So I think they've always done a tremendous job. And outside of that, look, when I'm driving in the morning, I'm listening to Dubai Eye, I'm listening to Brandy Scott and Richard Dean, and I think they do a great job. Everybody does. If you were to go. I mean, I've got, if you're looking for arts coverage, we've got great titles within ITP, but I've got a good old friend, Saeed over at the National in Abu Dhabi, who I think he's a fabulous human being. So there's enough space for very healthy competition and rivalry. But yeah, I'd say FT is one of my go-to sources. BBC, and I do like a bit of Sky News, I have to say as well, which is everywhere here. Just because they tell the news in a slightly different format.
I had to put you on the spot there.
No, it's absolutely fine. I'm not sure what my CEO says when he watches this back.
We'll cut it out.
There is only Arabian Business.
Amazing. So one last question before we wrap up our discussion with my rapid fire questions. And this is a question that I always like to ask my guests. It's a question around productivity. What is that one tool that helps you become more productive at work? Or maybe if you're trying to get your creative juices going, what is that tool or system or ritual that you kind of go for to get more focused and zoned in?
Difficult these days.
Yeah, I bet.
Because there are so many distractions. Actually taking yourself, or if you're struggling to find the line, if you're struggling to get started, change your environment, go somewhere quiet, focus on the task, turn your notifications off on your phone, and literally just focus. There's a guy, Cal Newton, I think his name is, wrote a great book called Deep Work, which is we are getting as a society worse at just going into a retreat and focusing on one task, because our phones are always pinging, our emails are always pinging. Even in conversations, how many times do you find yourself in the middle of a conversation like this, Omar, picking up your mobile phone to check the WhatsApp?
All the time.
And if you want to have an effective conversation, turn your phone upside down so you can't see notifications at the very least, and mute those notifications. So to kickstart the creative juices, I would say, one, if you can't, change your location, remove distractions, and then start thinking about it. And sometimes you've got to ask yourself, what's the purpose of this task? What am I trying to achieve? If I'm writing a travel review, shall we say, what am I trying to impart? What am I trying to make the reader feel? I could do a checklist of the stuff that's in the room, but that's not every hotel room has that. What does it feel to be in that moment, and what is of value to the audience? So it would be that. And sometimes as well, okay, so I give you a journalistic point of view. Sometimes it's actually just do something. And we have a lot of junior journalists that come to us, and they're always trying to find the perfect intro. And they've got great quotes, they've got great facts, but they're sat looking at a blank screen and they don't know how to start. And actually, it's just start writing up the things that people said, and then just start putting your facts on the screen. And then the words are on the screen. Then you begin to understand, right, what is the most interesting line out of what's on my screen? So it's movement, start moving, start doing something, rather than just sit there paralyzed by indecision.
Yeah, I like that. I agree, because they can easily get crippled by. I'm one of those people. When I had, like, back in the day in college days, when I had to write up a research paper, I would always get fixated on my intro. Like, what's that going to look like for me? And that would, take me days sometimes. I'm glad you brought this up.
Sometimes it is the
momentum.
Sometimes it's the facts that present the intro.
Yeah.
That's it. And also there is, one last. It's not a tip so much, but it's almost like muscle memory. Why was David Beckham able to, cross the ball with such pinpoint accuracy every single time he kicked it? Because he practiced on a golf course, kicking a ball onto a golf green to try and get it close to the flag over and over and over and over again. And that's one of those things, like when we go back to passion, getting good at something, it might not be your passion, but getting good at it builds muscle memory. So you do the task to the best you can over and over, and eventually bits of it come naturally. You don't need to think about it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but that is, it takes patience to kind of embrace repetition of a task, shall we say.
Amazing. So we're coming to the end of the conversation, unfortunately, and I'm respectful of your time. But here at the One Day Podcast, we have to end it with 3 rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you a question and just tell me what's the first thing that comes to your mind. The whole point is you don't have to overthink it. So the first one is, what advice would you give your younger self if you had to go back in time to a younger Scott? What is that piece of advice you would give him?
Go easy on yourself.
Go easy on yourself. I like that.
Forgive yourself a bit more.
Yeah, we're very hard on ourselves. 100%. Question number 2, from your experience, what is that one tip you would give a person out there who's trying to, start a project, or who's starting to get on that passion path, or like, what tip would you give people to get them one day closer to that thing that they're trying to accomplish, whatever that is?
Well, that's a good one. I think it's movement. It's just start moving.
Start anywhere.
Just start anywhere. Start getting stuff down on paper and start moving forward. Movement is life. Don't stagnate. Just try and keep push forward, because you're only going to find out whether you're going to win or lose, or be successful or fail, by trying and by doing it. And I think, okay, so if I was to go back to a more clever answer, it would be, don't be afraid of failure. Because you're always going to fail. And I think when I say go easy on myself, don't be afraid of failure. There's no way you're going to find out whether you're good at something until you try it.
Try it. 100%.
And if you try something and you are not good at it, then you don't need to beat yourself up about it. You just need to move on to the next thing and find out, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? What is my passion? So they're kind of connected.
Great answer. The last question is, what is it that Scott wishes to accomplish one day? And you could start the sentence with, one day I would like to, or one day I wish I could.
Be slimmer, more attractive, grow my hair back. Do you know what?
I'll take that for an answer if you.
No, I mean, family is everything. I've got a young daughter. I've got 2 sons. I've got a son who's going through university. So
bless your family.
If I can, one day Scott wants to be a good father, and watch his children succeed. And if I can empower them to live, good life, or put them in a good place, then amazing. That'd be good.
Nice. That's an awesome ending to the conversation. Scott, thanks so much for your time and for the great value and insight you brought to the conversation. Honestly, this was great. Where can people
follow you? Omar. It's all you.
No, not at all. That was you. Where can people follow you, or follow, what you guys are doing at Arabian Business?
Well, arabianbusiness.com. You'll find us on all the usual social media channels. If you want to follow me personally, LinkedIn's the best place for me. and that's Scott Armstrong, editor, I think it is. But if you just search for Scott Armstrong, look for the bold one who's slightly overweight with a pin. And I do enjoy LinkedIn as a platform, so I'm there. But yeah, we're on ArabianBusiness.com. We're in lots of different shelves. In the magazines are in DFC and lots of different locations.
Yeah,
and we're online. Look for us online.
Nice, awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. Again. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you were able to pick up a thing or two that could help you in business or life. If you would like to hear more conversations like these and you're not yet a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe through your preferred podcast platform. And follow us on Instagram at oneday.thepodcast. And you could reach me on my personal Instagram account at Omar Almajali. And last but not least, if you prefer to watch the full episode on video, then you can do so on our YouTube channel, One Day the Podcast. Till next time.